I'm Norm Macdonald. Ask me anything. Hi. I'm Norm Macdonald. I'm here to do my Reddit IAmA. Victoria from Reddit will be helping me.
Hi Norm. My two brothers and I grew up in the 90s and would stay up late every Saturday to watch you on Update. We went on to obsess over dirty work and memorized it word for word. Can you share your favorite, or least favorite, memory during the making of the film? Thanks. #late Norm.
Oh yes, my favorite memory of the movie was Chris Farley, because we had him play a guy whose nose was bit off by a Sagan whore. So he did all the scenes with no notes, and he would improvise all his dialogue. He would ask first if it was alright, and I would say sure, because he was just the funniest guy ever. It was really sad with Chris, because he would always say he wanted to be as funny as John Belushi, and I would say that he funnier than John Belushi, but he never knew how funny he was. Sad.
I could have got my nose bit off by a Saigon whore. You bastard!
What's your favorite Bob Dylan song and why? If you met the man, what would you say to him? What's your favorite Springsteen song? Ever met that dude?
I've met Bob Dylan, but my favorite Dylan song is, Oh God, Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. My favorite song is Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. And I don't know Springsteen songs at all. Something about a dead dog lying in a ditch, I remember that. And then I remember Courtney Cox singing something about a dead dog in a ditch, and then Courtney Love jumped on stage and started dancing, which sounds like a bad Bob Dylan song. But I met Bob Dylan, that's the interesting part. It was pretty amazing, because I did not expect this. But I went to LA, I was living in Toronto, to do an audition for the Joan Rivers show way back when, and I was walking down the street all nervous in front of the world famous Comedy Store. I kept walking and walking, because I showed up 3 hours early, and so anyways, a car came by and then stopped, and Bob Dylan asked me for a light, because I was smoking a cigarette. I lit his cigarette, and said here you go buddy, pretending I didn't know who he was like an idiot. I thought it would be cool. I didn't say anything of interest to him, and then I had to go back to this ridiculous Joan Rivers audition. I did get the gig, but I didn't take it. I had to go from Bob Dylan to Mario Canton, who didn't believe my story.
I am not presently a Christian. And of course I haven't always been one. That would be absurd. And no, it does not impact my views on comedy at all. But at the present I am not one.
I only believe in God, that's all I believe in. You know what I don't believe in, Victoria? Nothingness. If you don't believe in nothingness, you must believe in God. There's no third option. And for all the people who say I've never seen God, I counter with I've never seen nothingness. Add laughter.
What's your very best life advice?
Like, seriously? Well, I think being happy with what you have is very important. But more important than that is not to be happy with what you don't have. Like not to make what you don't have happy. So be happy with what you have, and never be happy with what you don't have.
Hey Norm, huge fan. You and Colin Quinn are the only people I follow on Twitter. You can be absolutely hilarious and also make really interesting conversation. How's your memoir coming along? Do you have any books you've recently read you can recommend?
I'm reading a book right now. The best book I've read lately is In Search of Lost Time. My memoir is coming along swimmingly. Not that it's any of your business.
What was your favorite show to write for? Also, is it easier writing for your stand-up or shows?
Stand-up is the hardest to write for of anything. My favorite thing to write for was when I did Weekend Update on SNL, because I could write jokes which were easier to think of than sketches. But I liked writing for SNL the best.
Are you a fan of Louis C.K.? I love both of you guys and would like to know your thoughts on him.
Oh yes, I like Louis a lot. I was in New York and he wrote for Conan when I was on SNL, so I got to know him quite well, and of course, he's gone on to great success and yeah, I'm very happy for him. He's hysterical and he deserves it. It's nice when the most famous comic in the world is also a great comic.
I'm extremely excited you and Adam Edgett are back for another season of the podcast. You guys are hilarious together. Norm, You often make references to Russian literature classics. What are some of your favorites?
Well, I can't really be funny in this. Should I just say what they are? Well, I like anything that's written by Leo Tolstoy or Gogol. My favorite is War and Peace. And I just love Leo Tolstoy. He was fantastic to work with. And there's one guy I forgot to mention and the fan of Russian literary greats, Yakov Smirnov.
Norm, I love the way you speak. Not like an erotic voice or anything, but the way you put together stories and tangents. Not always your jokes, but even the deep and interesting stories. I don't really have a question, just wanted to tell you that you're the funniest person I've ever heard and you bring a lot of joy to people in a world that needs it.
That's really nice.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Well, it would be a tie between Opie and Anthony. Both fine fellas.
Hey Norm. You have the best Twitter feed. I especially enjoyed your comments on Roseanne last night. My question, do you think that writing for Roseanne helped you become a better writer or made you see the bullshit that is the entertainment industry? Or both? Oh, and Dirty Work is the most criminally underrated comedy film of all time. Baby Gorilla.
You baby gorilla. Why don't you work a zoo and stop bothering people?
Oh, Roseanne herself definitely taught me how to write. And yes, of course you see the ridiculousness of Hollywood.
What's your favorite movie ever?
I guess my favorite movie ever is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because it always makes me cry at the end.
What's the best book on the subject of death other than the works of Becker?
Wow, this person knows the works of Becker? Well, that's probably the best one, Becker's Denial of Death. There's a book by Otto Rank, The Trauma of Birth. He talks about death in that one a lot. You probably don't want to read about death, but if you do want to read about death, it's a good summer read.
Please go on Opie and Anthony more. You and the show are hilarious, and complement each other perfectly.
Oh yay, those guys are really funny. I go on them every time I go to New York, but I'll be goddamned if I fly 6 hours to go on a radio show. But they are fine fellas, and they are fantastic to work with. Other comics. I go, well, if it worked for that guy in Atlanta, it'll work for me in Miami. Wait, Victoria, why aren't you laughing? I don't actually steal jokes from people.
Ever watched the movie The Room?
The Room? What are you, Inspector Clouseau? The Room? The one where the director goes to the screenings and pretends he did it on purpose? No, I haven't seen it. Adam, have you seen it? No, he hasn't seen it. Adam hasn't seen it, but he has seen the men's restroom plenty of times, and when his bladder was empty too.
Hey Norm. Huge fan since Dr. Dolittle. I've always wondered. How did you get into live tweeting different sporting events like golf, soccer, the draft, etc.?
Sometimes I would on the internet talk about sports, and then someone would say, oh, I'm not watching, I'm not near a TV, because people have jobs and commitments and so forth. So that's where I come in. I give them their sports, while they go through their earthly contacts. You know, the day-to-day life.
What are you wearing?
At the present moment, I just wear sweats and a t-shirt. Gravy. Lot of gravy.
You are the greatest comedian of all time. Do you write all of the jokes for Norm Macdonald live yourself? If not, how many writers help produce them?
We have upwards of 10,000 writers right now. And frankly, we are going broke quick. I don't know anything about Mechanical Turk, but a lot of times we're running low on jokes. We'll take our cars down to Home Depot and pick up a couple of undocumented workers, bring them back. They think something odd's going to happen. I say nope, and they end up scouring the newspaper for jokes.
Hey Norm, I am fond of Tolstoy's writing and I saw on Twitter you were too. You said that you believed he was the second deepest thinker of all time. I find you and your perspective on life fascinating, and you are also my favorite stand-up, and so I have to know who you believe is the deepest thinker of all time?
Regardless of religion, or what your beliefs of religion would be, the teachings of Jesus are shown to be the most profound thinking of all time. Ideas such as love thy enemy or turn the other cheek, these are not thoughts that come to a normal person. And of course, all of the great pacifists throughout the ages, they all trace back to that one person, religious belief or not. Historically speaking, he was by far the deepest thinker. He could think. He thought in layers. And if you take only his words and forget everything else in the Bible, you'll have yourself a very good book.
Dylan has shown at least some level of interest in comedy with his sketch comedy videos. Have you ever considered collaborating with him on something?
My son Dylan is very funny. He's much funnier than I am. But I think he's kind of on his own wavelength. But I consider him funnier than me.
Hey Norm, love your sense of humor and I've watched and listened to most of your work, including talk show appearances. One question. Who is forcing you to do this IAmA? Thanks, I'll take my answer off the air.
Victoria Larkin. You were married to... I know you weren't married to Barry Larkin. I'm just kidding you. To be honest with you, that story made me cry a little bit.
Hi Norm, can't wait for the podcast today. I'd like to ask you what you think the one, single, most important thing in stand-up is?
I would say authenticity.
Norm, you're my favorite comedian, but Gilbert Gottfried is an extremely close second. When are you going to have him on your podcast again so I can settle my indecision once and for all?
Oh, well, I love Gilbert. He was my favorite comedian when I started, and he was very nice to me. He was sweet, but he was extremely cheap. And when he first met me, he said, I know this is the first time we are meeting, but I feel it's your turn to pick up the check. We were at Mayor's Deli in Toronto, Ontario. I'd love to have him on again, as soon as he's in town.
I think cancer's a small price to pay to lick Catherine Zeta-Jones' pussy.
Who would be your dream guest, dead or alive, to have on the podcast?
Well, I would rather have a dead guy, because that's good TV. Or as we say here at Jash, that's good computer. No, I guess you know, Nelson Mandela probably. It's easy to say that, now that he's dead. When he was alive, he would be last on my list, but now that he's dead, listen, South Africa's hard on the living but it sure do speak well of the dead. Johannesburg's hard on the living, but she sure does speak well of the dead. Actually the real true answer is Robert Blake.
God damn, that was a depressing day. Because Robert Blake was supposed to come in, and then Daniel Kellison talks to him on the phone for an hour, and he fucking won't show up.
Norm, I've seen a lot of comics I love do stand-up. Carlin, Stanhope, Mitch Hedberg, but you remain the funniest dude I've seen. Jon Stewart is right. Television is better when Norm Macdonald is on it. There's been a lot of buzz on Twitter with some great comics backing you to host the Late Late Show on CBS when Craig Ferguson leaves. If CBS offered you the job, would you take it?
Well, I love Jon Stewart and I love Stephen Colbert. They are very funny. But personally, I don't like comedy whose first intention is not comedy. So both Colbert and Stewart, their first agenda is comedy, but other people their first agenda is looking smart. And that's the kind of comedy that doesn't age very well, or make you laugh. I don't think anyone likes to be preached to, except by a down-home preacher. If I were a preacher, I'd go to Jimmy Swaggart, a man who calls himself a preacher. I would take my comedy unadulterated.
I'd like to see you more. How can I do that?
Go watch Jash. Or buy a property at, no, but if you want to see me more, I mean, I would love to see myself more on television, personally, because I'm a big fan. The best stuff is on my comedy album, and then you can go and watch my podcasts on VPN on Jash.
Norm. European Night Owl checking in. Thanks for airing Norm Podcast Lev at a comfortable 3 in the morning. Stoked to see it return despite EGET's lobbying. Living on the wrong half of the globe for catching a Norm live show. Why so few stand-up releases? I read somewhere that it's a deliberate coys. Trying to force us flying you out here? Might just work. I got some older bootleg Norm shows, they are so funny. No editing, just you and audience for an hour, perfect. More please, new, old, more. Ever done anything with either Brian Regan or Paul F. Tompkins? Who is the funniest poker player? How would you feel if a disciple started following you around? Loved your Grantland pieces, absolutely can't wait for the memoir, 4 great pages will do, more is bonus, all the best.
Living on the wrong half of the globe for catching a Norm Live show. Why so few stand-up releases? I read somewhere that it's a deliberate choice. Trying to force us flying you out here might just work. I got some older bootleg Norm shows. They are so funny. No editing, just you plus audience for an hour. Perfect. More please. New, old, more. As far as I know, they have computers everywhere. It sounds like to me like a filthy Paraguayan, if I had to guess. Wait, not this side of the globe. But I know Paraguay exists. Like my spleen, I know it exists, just not where it is. So you say Paraguay is on the right side of the globe. By the way, if you're saying you live on the wrong half of the globe, you may have issues with self-esteem. But you are certainly right. I don't like to do stand-up. I only did one special, because I don't like capturing it. You know how the old aborigines used to think the camera would steal your soul? That's how I feel. That's my career. Ever done anything with either Brian Regan or Paul F. Tompkins? Oh yes, I kissed Brian Regan's ass one night for a long time. And I don't know Paul F. Tompkins. But I think Brian is one of the best comics in the world. Who is the funniest poker player? Oh, Gavin Smith. He's a good Canadian boy. He's from Hamilton. How would you feel if a disciple started following you around? I'd go at last. I've been fishing for men for a good 30 years now. I haven't caught one. Everybody I meet I tell them quit your job, come follow me, and they say why? And I say trust me. Usually it's fishermen. I say what are you doing there? And they say I'm fishing. And I say come follow me and be a fisher of men, and they say I'd rather be a fisher of fish. And they say what does that entail? And I say well you'd follow me around and say okay after everything I do. Okay, IAmA. Oh my gosh, well Brent is making me go. It's not my idea. Brent says I have to go. You know Brent? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Brent. He can be a real nice fella. He can be one mean son of a bitch. It's up to you. Well thank you for all of your questions. And especially the person who had the story of stealing the candy that was meant for others. Your question was very moving to me and made all the other questions seem pointless and ridiculous in comparison. So, I'm thanking one person. Wait, no 3 people. The candy store raconteur, you, Victoria Larkin, and her husband of 14 years, Barry Larkin. Thank you.